especially for all the visitors, as Gerald said. We're glad to see you, and I'm trying, there they are, and I was looking for somebody. And you know what, I met these people back in October, I think it was, at Toledo Inn, and you know, they came in and visited, and I said to Danny, I said, "You're Ray's brother-in-law," and he goes, "Shh." I kept that on the low key. And so then I told Ray what he said, and Ray said, "Tell him I said thank you." Don, I'm going to pray for you. We're grateful we have everyone here. We're glad that we can join in. I thought about that song as Don was singing it, and it has a memory that came to me. And it's funny how songs that do that to you. Back in 2009, I took a little trip on my motorcycle, and I was in the backwoods of Tennessee. And as I was riding along, and it was early morning, I left my brother's house, was going to see a cousin. And I was looking at the beauty of God's world. And as I looked to the side, there was a deer running along in this field beside me. And you know what I started singing? This is my Father's word. We need to always keep that in mind. This morning our lesson is entitled The Be-Nots. Now, these terms, let words together, especially in the King James Version, are translated together about 64 times in the New Testament. And almost all of them, it is an admonition not to be like something Jesus brings up. In fact, in this context, we are going to have it. In the New King James, those things are often translated 45 times, do not be. So here we want to look at that. We're going to look at some things that we should not be. Be not. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, and when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But when you pray, use not vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they will be heard for their much speaking. Be not ye therefore like unto them, for your Father knoweth what things ye have need of before ye ask him. And that's Matthew chapter 6, verses 5 through 8, and that's from the King James Version. Now, that's the only one I have out of the King James, just to get the point of the be not. You know, there are things we need to understand that we're not to be. And that's our thought today that we want to get across. We're not to be like the hypocrites. You know, the word hypocrite in the Greek literally means pretender. And you know, that's the thing about it. When you look at those Pharisees, you see them as pretenders. And Christians are not to be pretenders. They're to be sincere in their Christianity. They're to be striving to do as they ought to do. Here in Matthew chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount says, "Take heed that you not do your charitable deeds before men, to be seen by them. Otherwise you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Surely I say to you, they have their reward." You know, when you talk about these hypocrites, you're talking about something else. You're talking about glory seekers. Because that's why they do it that way. When they say those long, pretentious prayers, when they give their gifts and say, "Look at me. See what I'm doing." They are seeking their own glory. And it doesn't have to be just in prayer or even in giving. There's other ways that we can do things, not for God's glory, but for our glory. And we're not to be like that. In fact, the realization is we deserve no glory. Only God does. He's done everything for us. You know, I said it last week, and I'll say it again. One of the greatest privileges that a preacher can have is be God's instrument in baptizing somebody into Christ. It was a great privilege to baptize Bryce a couple weeks ago. But you know, what did I do? I didn't die for him. It wasn't my blood that cleansed him of his sins. And it's not of my own words that I use that convict the heart. It's God's word. I deserve no glory, but God does. And I'm grateful to God that He allows me to do those type of things and even stand before you today. That's who should be getting the glory. And that's the thing that we have to remember. Because those that pretend, what have they done? They actually have taken away from the glory of God. Notice Matthew chapter 6, verse 16 through 18, Jesus again saying, moreover, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites, with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces, that they may appear to men to be fasting. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. There's a reminder there. We are to do things in secret. We are to do things without looking for people to find out. It may happen on occasion they do find out. But the reality of it, those secret things we do bring glory to God. When we do them out in the open, are we not just seeking our glory in ourselves? Sometimes it may be necessary that we do them in the open. But it should not be our desire. It should not be what rules in our heart, lest we become as the pretenders do. We are to be different. Look at Matthew 6, verse 3 to 4, when answered about the charitable deeds. When you do your charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, that your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. Now, I'll be the first to admit, it's pretty hard to hide something from your left hand that your right hand does. But you know that should be our attitude. That even if I could do it without my own knowledge, let me do it that way. And don't let me make a list of things to tell people about. I often think about Paul. When he writes the 1 Corinthians letter, he makes a statement, I thank God that I have baptized none of you. Just because of the dissension that's going on between it. It said, lest you say that I baptized you in my own name. And then he starts thinking, he said, well, I did baptize this one. And I did baptize these. But any others, I don't know. What does that tell us about Paul? He wasn't keeping a checklist. He wasn't keeping count of how many people he baptized or converted. Why? Because he sought no glory for himself, but glory for God. We start doing things like that, it's easy to start basking in our own glory instead of God's glory. And we are to be different. Be not like the world. In Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, Paul writes, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Notice the point there that Paul makes. That we present ourselves, our bodies, a living sacrifice. What does that mean? That means our entire being to be a sacrifice for God. No longer our will, but His will be done. And that everything we do, we determine by the counsel of God. We strive to be pleasing in His sight. And that's the point. And notice he says, and do not be conformed to the world. What is that? We're not to be like the world. We look at the world around us and we see the things that are going on, and we ought to just shake our head. We ought to wonder, as those souls that had been martyred for Christ that were up under the throne, up under the altar in heaven in Revelation, that cried out, how long? God, how long up with this? You know, that's not an old question, and it's not a new question. It's one that goes way back. Even Habakkuk asked in the time of Judah and their idolatry, how long are you going to let this continue? And you know, we also need to pray, praying, Lord, don't let us be a part of it. It's easy to get caught up in the world. You know, I've often made the statement that you can't fix stupidity. But you can turn on Facebook and see it in action every day. Do you know the things that brethren are letting divide brethren through this social media? It's ridiculous sometimes what we do. We come in here and we act like Christians, and I'm not saying anybody in here is guilty of that. Don't come give me that. I'm just saying brethren. And then we go out there and turn on our computers and act like the heathen. Is that not being conformed to the world? We need to think about what we're doing, what we're saying, what we're putting up with, what we put on our little Facebook page. I'm ashamed to say that of all my friends on Facebook that are brethren, I can only count 5 that have taken the time to allow right now to change their profile picture where it just simply says on it, I am pro-life. I want to ask you that question. Shouldn't every Christian be pro-life? And why wouldn't we say it? And why wouldn't we understand that God would want us to say it? Be not conformed to the world. Are those around us? I want you to think about that. How many times has the church been infiltrated by things done in false religion because it allowed it? Because they said, well, that's the answer. They're getting more people. Notice this where in Deuteronomy, when Moses is speaking to the people, when the Lord your God cuts off from before you the nations which you go to dispossess, and you displace them and dwell in their land, take heed to yourself that you are not ensnared to follow them. After they are destroyed from before you, and that you do not inquire after their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods? I also will do likewise. Notice it said, you shall not worship the Lord your God in that way. For every abomination to the Lord which he hates they have done to their gods, for they burn even their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods. Deuteronomy 12:29 through 31. Did you notice that? We're not to be like the world. We're to worship as God would have us worship. In speaking, Jesus said, but the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship him. You know, I was real proud of one of the boys that was in my car yesterday morning, was going over, and I think it was Ethan. We're talking about something, and I said, if we start worshiping like this, what happens? And he goes, the entertainer becomes the entertained. And I thought, that is such a great statement. It's straight out of the mouth of a babe. What? We are not to be entertained. We are to be the ones entertaining God. We're to be doing it his way to make it pleasing to him, acceptable to him. And when we start looking like those around us and acting like those around us, what are we doing? We're seeking entertainment. And it's not about entertainment. It's about being fulfilled. And I don't know any greater fulfillment than to be able to leave and say, I have done my best to be pleasing to God. And I have been uplifted by my brothers and sisters in knowing that we were striving to do what is pleasing to God. That's fulfillment to me. Because when I see that, and I know God is well pleased, I am being the Christian He wants me to be. We're to walk by faith, not by sight. Oh, we see things people do. We see things the world does. We see what the world says is great and acceptable, and it sounds good. You know, the adage, why should a woman raped have to go through the delivery of her rapist's child? You know, that's the premise on which Roe and Wade stands. And that's the statement that the world has made to convince us that abortion ought to be legal. And it is so wrong to use the extremity. In fact, it says that less than 10% of the women raped end up pregnant. And to be honest, women who carry their children to term, and I've done the research, or I've read the research, let me put it that way, from the rapists, say that bringing the child to term has helped them overcome the trauma of the rape. And of the one psychologist I read, of the women that he studied, 100 women, 98 of them said they had feelings for their child. 2 of them said they had no feelings, good or bad, but they did not hate the child. 50 of those women raised their children, kept them. Did I tell you something about God's plan? How even a baby forced upon a woman can bring joy and healing. Let's not be like the world. Let's look at what we ought to do. There's a thing that we ought to realize, and speaking of eating of meats, whether being of opinion, Paul makes a statement in Romans chapter 14, verses 23b. For whatever is not from faith is sin. He said, he who eats doubting sins. If we're doing something that we have doubt about whether or not it's pleasing to God, and we do it anyway, we're sinning. It's plain and simple. But what if I can back it up with what the God says? It is no longer sin. Faith comes by hearing, hearing by the Word of God. We strive to be pleasing. And he says, be not deceived. Here in the context of Luke chapter 21 and Matthew 24, Jesus is speaking concerning the destruction of Jerusalem, and he said, take heed that ye not be deceived, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time is drawn near. Therefore do not go after them. In that statement, I am he, saying that Christ, Jesus is the Christ. But use that to lead people astray. You know, there's reality sometimes we want to come. Nobody would come to me in the name of the Lord and lie to me and deceive me. We want to believe that. We want to think that, but that's not true. Because they are. They will. Even in the time of Paul, the devil was using his deceptions. When Paul writes the second letter, chapter 11, and the teachings that some are doing, trying to straighten them out, he says, for such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transform themselves into the apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their works. You know, here's the reality. The devil doesn't even go to the atheists and say, I'm going to convince you that there is no God so you can go to hell. He just convinces them there is no hell and there is no God. He doesn't go to someone and say, hey, if I can get you to stray a little bit from God, you know, that narrow way, either to the right or to the left. you'll end up losing your soul. He doesn't do that. In fact, what he convinces them is, you can go down this path and you don't have to worry about hell. You'll still go to heaven. How about the lie, there's no such thing as hell? Surely a loving God would not convict anyone to hell. See, the devil just tries to get us a little bit off the mark. Why? Because that's the way he leads us astray. But God gave us His Word so that we don't have to worry about being deceived. How many people have heard the modern teachings concerning Matthew 24 and tried to convince us talking about the end of the world, but yet Jesus said, no man knoweth the hour. And He says all these things that He said beforehand would pass away, verse 35, would happen before that generation passed away. Now either Matthew 24 has already came and gone, or there's some really old people out there somewhere. Don't be deceived. Don't be led astray by the devil. John 8, verse 31 through 36, Jesus said to the Jews that believed Him, if you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered Him, we are Abraham's descendants, and have never been in bondage to anyone. How can you say you will be made free? Jesus answered them, most surely I say to you, whoever commits sin is a slave to sin. And a slave does not abide in the house forever, but a son abides forever. Therefore, if the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. Jesus tried to explain to them that He was talking about spiritual freedom. Freedom from the condemnation of sin. And He reminds us, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Truth can be known. We don't have to be deceived. God gave us His Word so that we can know the truth, so we can examine it and do what's right. And that's the thing that we want to do. We don't want to be like them. We don't want to be like the pretenders, the world, and the deceived. We want to be those who are pleasing God. We want to be as Christ would have us to be. And we walk by faith, not by sight, knowing that we should stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give account of things done in the body. Therefore, we make it our aim, whether absent or present, to be well-pleasing to Him. That's our goal. Living faithfully in the truth. Living a life pleasing God. Don't be like the ones who choose to ignore God, serve other gods, live unrighteously. Be like the ones who are trying to imitate Christ, as Paul said. Be an imitator of Christ. Live as Christ would have you live. Get your heart right with God. Don't leave this morning without your heart being right with God. Are you a Christian? Have you been baptized in Christ for your remission of your sins? Have your garments been cleansed white with His blood? Are you still striving against Him? What are you waiting for? He died for you. He died for each and every one of us. And are we living as we know we ought to live? If not, we need to change our commitment. We need to commit to living as God would have us live, to being the Christian that He would have us be, doing the works, the good works which He created us for. If there's anyone we can help get their heart right with God, we ask you to come while we stand and while we sing.